insight throughout our news. Thank you. Now we move on and we stay in the region. Thousands of Israelis gathered in Tel Aviv protesting against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government and calling for the establishment of a state inquiry committee to investigate the events surrounding Hamas's October 7th attack. Demonstrators have voiced concerns that Netanyahu's government is refusing to take the responsibility. Let's listen in.
מתוך הכאב הזה, דווקא מתוך האפר, אנחנו חייבים לקום ולדרוש את הדבר האחד שחשבנו שהוא מובן מאליו. חקירה עמוקה ויסודית של התהליכים, המחדל, ההפקרה. ועדת חקירה ממלכתית, מלאה, עצמאית, שתחקור כל פרט, כל החלטה, כל מחדל, כל שתיקה.
Our government, who was in power when October 7th happened, and our Prime Minister, who was in power for at least the 15 years before that, are doing everything in their power to stop or to prevent the establishment of a national inquiry committee. They are trying to come up with all these solutions that are unacceptable. They are pretty much don't want to be investigated, and we are not having it.
The protests also saw calls for the return of the remains of 3 hostages still held in Gaza. Under the ceasefire agreement reached in October, Hamas is expected to release all surviving hostages, but the bodies of the deceased have yet to be returned. Let's listen into what the protesters have said.
נשכח לרגע את 3 החטופים שעדיין בעזה. רן, דרור וסות עיסק. משפחותיהם וכל עם ישראל מחכים לכם. המלאכה עדיין לא הושלמה עד שכולם יחזרו. עד החטוף האחרון.
שלא רוצים ועדת חקירה ממלכתית. אני מזהיר אתכם שההיסטוריה תשפוט אתכם לחומרה ושמכם יהיה לו אות קין לדורות קדימה, אחרי שהציבור יעיף אותם הביתה.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Yossi, for joining us again. Yossi, why is government of Netanyahu or Netanyahu's administration not making this, not taking this state inquiry committee?
They are ready to establish a state inquiry committee. The question is what kind of a committee it's going to be. And some people want it to be a certain kind of committee that would be formed by the Supreme Judge. And Netanyahu claims that the Supreme Judge is biased against him and he doesn't want him to form the committee. He wants the committee to be formed by some sort of consensus between the coalition and the opposition on a paritatic basis, and this is the big debate. Of course, the opposition is not willing to cooperate with that. And so we are stuck because Netanyahu worries that the committee that is going to be nominated by the Supreme Judge is going to take a very biased position against him.
And what could be the potential consequences of establishing this state inquiry committee according to what the people who are in the streets now in Israel are asking for, including the government's accountability and public trust?
Well, of course, there's enough responsibility and blame to share for everybody, because this debacle of October 7th touched every aspect of the Israeli public affairs situation. And the government was responsible in a way for what happened. The military was responsible. The intelligence community was responsible. Everybody has a share in it. And I'm sure that once the committee is formed, one way or another, it will point at the responsibility of each of the elements involved. And there was a question, of course, is it going to be just saying that he and he, those are the people who are responsible for what happened, or whether it's going to be also blaming them and charging them with prices that they would have to pay for being responsible for this debacle. And that's another issue that is separating the different opinions about what kind of a committee we need, what authorities it should have. But I think that it's obvious that the committee is going to say that we were totally unprepared for what happened. We were misunderstanding the situation beforehand. We believe that we, and I mean almost everybody, I personally wrote something different before the war, just the opposite. But most of the people in charge were under the impression that Hamas is deterred, that Hamas hasn't the capability to carry out any kind of massive terror attack, and that Hamas is focused on improving the living conditions of the people living in Gaza Strip. That this was, of course, totally wrong, and because of this belief, people were not preparing themselves to face such a wide-scale terror attack, in spite of the fact that we had information that was not shared with the government about the intentions of Hamas. Hamas was preparing exactly what they actually eventually executed. And of course, going to be the question of whether the government is responsible for things they didn't know of, or they were misled by the intelligence community and by the military to believe that Hamas doesn't pose a threat from Gaza. And this is all going to be discussed in the committee. And Netanyahu is afraid that a biased committee would put the blame on him, in spite of the fact that he believes that he has, of course, some responsibility, but not the kind of responsibility, not the kind of direct responsibility that those people you mentioned before, and you show them demonstrating, want to put on him.
Yes.
And the situation politically is very loaded, and it's very clear that some people see the committee not as a tool for finding out what actually happened, but as a tool to blame Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, of course, doesn't want that to be the case. So that's a very complicated issue in Israel.
Yes.
I hope that we should be able eventually to form a committee that would be trusted by the vast majority of the Israelis, not only by one part of it. And this calls for very difficult work and finding this kind of solution.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Yossi Cooper-Wasser for joining us and sharing that insight from Israel. Now, moving on, Israeli settlers have assembled